Last year wasn't as nice of a day,
Good evening.
so that'll have some.
I'd like to call this joint meeting with the Planning Commission and the Board of Trustees to order on October 24th.
Is that on?
Mine's on. Did flip the switch?
Mine is.
Good. Good now?
No.
No.
Can you hear? Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
Okay.
Talk right into the mic, yeah.
Okay.
but I couldn't hear her.
Okay. I'm calling this October 24th meeting, joint meeting with the Planning Commission and the Board of Trustees to order. Please stand for the invocation and the pledge. Ms. Otto, did you want to? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
God, thank you for bringing us together today as we meet in a group setting to discuss the opportunities of our township and what you have blessed before us. Lord, let us keep our minds open to what you have given to us. Give us the right direction and let us make the right decisions in your glory. Amen. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Manley, will you please call the roll for the Board of Trustees?
Shockley,
Here.
Zelenak, present. Manley here. Docket,
Here.
Oliver,
Here.
Otto,
Here.
Chick.
Here.
Okay. And then, go ahead, Mr.
Mr. Zarzecki, can you please call roll for the Planning Commission?
Mr. Roman,
Here.
Ms. Chick,
Here.
Zarzecki present, Brad Kuzno is absent, Sam McQuinto,
Present.
Ms. Steffens,
Present.
and Ms. Afonte.
Here.
Thank you. We have quorums of both bodies. Now we have an opportunity, let's see, we need to adopt the balance of the agenda. Can I have a motion to do so? Okay, motion by Chick.
Support.
Support by Ms. Manley. Okay, do we have any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, hearing none. Now we have the opportunity for call to the public. It's an opportunity for you to come up and speak anything on your mind. 3 minutes. We try to keep it to 3 minutes. Please state your name, your address, and make sure the microphone's turned on and it's very close to your mouth so that we can record it for the television. Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening.
Should be. Is the button pushed up? Mr. Nelson,
Boy, you can
Would
say
you-
something, Mike.
would you be able to?
Hello?
It's on.
Oh, it's on.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Nelson.
I hope that doesn't count against my 3
No,
minutes.
hold it right up to your mouth, though.
Okay,
Thank you.
do it this way. Good evening, Supervisor Chalkley, Manager Ains, and board members. My name is Robert McGee, 45855 5 Mile Road. From time to time, we all run across an employee of an organization that for whatever reason, we just wind up having a problem with. Sometimes we let it go, sometimes we complain, we tell neighbors, friends, make phone calls or write letters, or we drop what we're doing and come to a board meeting to complain. And sometimes we run across an employee that goes the extra distance to be professional, courteous, and responsive in such a way that makes their entire organization simply look good. So we drop what we're doing and come to a board meeting to let them know what a great job their employee is doing. You have that employee in Miss Mary Bird. Several years ago, my wife and I started our endeavor to build our retirement farm. We came here and met Miss Bird over these past 2 years as Miss Bird guided us through the permit process and answered numerous questions. She has consistently impressed us. It's not that she knows all the answers instantaneously, it's that she'll find the answer right then or get back to you with it. Now, I must say, I've not always liked the answer, but I trust that it's the right answer. And quite frankly, that speaks volumes. For if you trust the employee that represents the organization, you trust the organization. I trust she is keeping us in compliance with your ordinances and your regulations, and that I will always like. There's no doubt we've been a pain to deal with, and yes, we are the ones with the berm on 5 Mile that received a gazillion truckloads of dirt this past summer, which most likely caused a gazillion phone calls to the township. You have a number of great employees that I have had the honor of meeting. I wanted to single out Miss Bird because I have dealt with her the most as my wife and I launch our dream. The leadership of this township has changed over the past year. However, Miss Bird has remained consistent. She's consistent in representing Northfield Township in a positive light by doing the right thing. And may I add, with a smile. I've also had the honor of meeting Manager Ains and several of you our elected officials. Your eagerness and love of this community also speaks volumes as you launch your dreams and the dreams of your constituents for Northfield Township. Stay the course. Please keep this a welcoming community to build and live in. Thank you for your time.
Barbara Griffith, 438 Jennings Road. I'm the chair of the Downtown Development Authority. And the big elephant in the room tonight is the RFP to talk about for the North Village Park area. And I wanted to let you know that we've been working on this, the Downtown Planning Group and the Downtown Development Authority, since a year ago May, so almost a year and a half. And I'm very proud of the finished product that you have in front of you. And we, in our meeting last night, had a unanimous support for this, and several of our members have shown up tonight to be in support of this. And at the Trunk or Treat event on Sunday, which was a big, big success, we had a lot of positive feedback from the community on this synthesis plan. So hopefully things will move forward.
Would the other DDA members like to stand up, and the DPG members who have worked on this plan? At least we can recognize you. Oh, hello, there's Mr. and Mrs. Sechrist and Jenny Olney, who planned the Trunk or Treat, and it was quite a treat out there. Hundreds of people, hundreds. It was wonderful. Thank you. Okay, yes, it was great. Okay. Do we have anyone else who would like to speak to us this evening at the call to the public? Please come up.
Hello. I don't think it's working. Okay. David Gordon, 5558 Helena Road.
I don't think it's working.
It's working. It was fine.
Can he hear it? Okay. As long as the batteries are in.
As long as the batteries are in. Okay. I'm 100% in favor of a waterfront park. I think it's a great idea. I thought it's a great idea for bringing people to town for decades. I'm also 100% in favor of planning, especially long-term planning, not just for the Whitmore Lake area, but for the entire township. I wanted to ask one question, which I hope this is a completely successful park plan. It seems like it's gotten to be much more than just a park at this point. It seems like it's a giant development plan at this point. And I've heard the supervisor and other members of the board say that if a plan such as the one that you have here actually, whoa, there you go, actually gets approved, that you're going to need to expand the sewer system to do that. If this plan requires between $3 and $6 million in sewer expansion, I would suggest that maybe you want to ask the voters whether they're willing to pay for that before we go through all this. Because otherwise, if you have a developer come in with a great plan, but the voters say, no, we're not interested in ponying up $6 million for the sewage treatment plant, then I don't know what we've spent all this money on in time to create a plan for, because it won't be able to go forward. So far, it appears as if there's been about $400,000 spent on the property and on planning for this. One of the promises of the trustees and the administration here was that you would help develop and enliven downtown Whitmore Lake, which I think is fantastic. The other promise was land preservation. $400,000 has been spent on downtown. I'd like to see more than nothing spent on land preservation, because that's what's been spent on it so far, especially since 60% of all the tax dollars that come into this community come from the rural residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak at this time? Okay. Seeing no one else, I'd like to encourage the board to refrain as much as possible from extraneous comments, but if there's something specific you'd like to comment on at this time, we have that opportunity. We'll have that opportunity later in the meeting also for board member comments. Thank you. Okay, Ms. Bellinger, go ahead. I didn't see you, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ms. Bellinger.
Good evening, and we did mention that sometime back we were going to keep a running total of the expenses for the Northfield Township Park. I do believe we're kind of overdue to find out what we have spent so far on the property, and that's just good to keep track of what we're spending and where we're at on that budget. Trunk or Treat, as mentioned, was fabulous. The weather helped, and it was a complete success, a beautiful time. I want to take a moment to mention the county millage coming up on November 7th, which actually we changed our board meeting from the 7th due to the election. Our next meeting at this point is planned for the 14th of November. Regarding this millage, it appears to have illegal language. So I would like to just take a moment to mention that the 1 mil would be a 22% tax increase on our county taxes, which is significant. Michigan law says the ballot shall specify the intended purpose of this renewed or new funds. The ballot language says allocated to jurisdictions in the county that maintain their own police force. This is not a purpose, and this is illegal. The 24% provision results in unequal taxation, as those governments without a police department are paying a higher rate than those with one. This is illegal under the Equal Protection Clause of the Michigan and U.S. Constitutions. So these are things to consider. I encourage that we vote no on this, and I would like to see our, this is illegal millage, is unethical, and should be voted down. We actually need to expect more from our Board of Commissioners. If they want to put a millage out for health, mental health, and so forth, they should put out a good, clean millage for mental health. This is actually a mess. So I'm encouraging people to vote no on that. One last thing. We're working on the park path for the new Northfield Township Park. Actually, we'll be discussing probably a little bit of that here tonight. I want to mention that at our homepage, the Northfield Township homepage website, under Community, pull it down at the bottom is a volunteer option. You go ahead and in the comments box put park path if you would like to help out with the park path distributing wood chips and finishing up cutting the path for that. Thank you for being here tonight, and I look forward to tonight's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. We have any other comments? Ms. Zelnok, I mean, you had your hand up first. Okay. Mr. Dockett.
Yes, I'd like to say something about the sewer. If we do the sewer, from what I understand, I could be wrong, maybe, but the people that are on the sewer would be paying. I don't think we get taxes from the whole township, but so I don't think that. The other thing is the millage, Washtenaw County, community mental health and public safety. That is going to cost us, if it passes, $15,433,608 the first year. It's for 8 years. So that's $123,468. And the second part that's on the millage is for the school district. It is $15,200,000 for the first year. It's for 8 years. So that's $121,600,000. So the two millages that are going to come up in a few days is for more than $245 million. I suggest we vote no. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Ms. Zelnok, go ahead.
Good evening. I'd like to thank the Planning Commission for coming tonight, and I'd like to thank the Planning Commission for all their hard work. I know that I have seen Ms. Steffens as well as Cecilia and Iaquinto at Trick or Treat and other events in the community, and I think we do have a common goal to make it easier to develop in the area that is targeted for that. So I look forward to the Planning Commission working on that and bringing that to the board. I want to thank Jenny for putting Trick or Treat together. It's our second annual, and I hope I'm here for the 20th annual, maybe the 30th, but I'm not so sure about that one. But it was a lot of fun, and the weather certainly helped, but you can't count on that, but it was a lot of fun, so thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm not going to say anything more. I'd like us to move ahead. We have any correspondence or announcements? Oh, down there. Go ahead, Ms. Otto.
Okay. I did want to also thank Jenny for stepping up. It takes a great individual to step up and to make things happen in a community, and I really appreciate her noticing that, you know, we did this last year, we need to do it again, and so I appreciate that. The other thing I wanted to bring up is Kiwanis has what they call a one-day event, which they provide to the community, and it will be a student safety seminar that we are providing on November 4th at 2 o'clock at the Whitmore Lake Elementary cafeteria. It's free to the public, and it's about okay to say, and it's on cyber safety. And this is a initiative from Bill Schuete's office, Attorney General's office, of a program that they put together, and it was presented to the Kiwanis Convention, and we thought that this would be a good event to provide to our community, to the students and to the parents.
Great.
So I encourage everyone else to participate, and it is free to the public.
Thank you, Ms. Otto. Okay. Mr. Kuzno has joined us now. Thank you very much. We'll let the record show that. Okay. If there's no more comments, we'll move on to don't know that there's any correspondence or announcements, so we will move on to our joint meeting. And Mr. Lippens is here to present the RFP process for the North Village. So I'll let you go ahead with that, Mr. Lippens.
All right. Good evening, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here tonight. I know we have some exciting things on the agenda, and I believe it was in August I made a presentation to the board, and the board directed us to prepare this RFP as we were finishing the plan for downtown and bring it back. And so we're at the point now where we've prepared an RFP, and it's on the agenda for discussion tonight. I think if you recall, the last joint meeting we had with Planning Commission was in last March, where we discussed the synthesis plan and the plan for North Village. And at that time, we were discussing the RFP process. Between then, the board has had some discussions about sewer expansion. We've worked with the DDA to develop a plan for downtown. And now we're back, and we have an RFP for consideration. We also tonight will be discussing the downtown strategic plan and the zoning and planning issues as well. But we're starting with the RFP. So what you have in your plan is an RFP, and this is a draft RFP. The process that we're discussing tonight would be for the manager, with us as support, to post this RFP and receive proposals from prospective private developers to develop a portion of the North Village site, part of the North Village site, in concert with the efforts to create a park plan. So to walk you through this document a little bit, I'll start at the beginning and kind of highlight where I think it's important.
Excuse me, Mr. Lippens. On everyone's spot was a revised RFP. Which one are you going through? The original one in our packet?
I'm going through the revised one.
Okay.
There was a meeting last night with the DDA where we made some minor changes to the proposal since the one that was included in the board packet. The main change was to make sure that the board was identified as the approving body. We felt that initially we had said the DDA and the board, but we took the board or the DDA out of that process. So the one that you're looking at is the one that is on your desk tonight, which reflects those changes.
I, as one board member, do not like to sit down and have stuff here and we get our packets on Thursday. So when we come and sit here and you've got stuff in front of us that we haven't seen, I think that's unfair. And I say it every time. I don't understand why we couldn't have had it on Thursday.
Thank you, Mr. Dockett, for your comment.
Fair comment.
Go ahead,
And
continue.
you could refer to either. It's the same page numbers and the minor differences I noted, but the real difference is that this one refers just to the board for approval of the RFP and site selection process. So the document first, it outlines a little bit about some of the background planning and refers to some of the background documents. Then there is a section on notices and disclaimers. A lot of this is essentially legalese to make sure that the township is not making any commitments by releasing the RFP, and that respondents do so because, to state their interest, but there's no contractual obligation on the city to do anything as a part of the response. Then there's a section which begins on page 4 on background, which, yes?
Do you have page numbers?
Pardon? Yeah, that's exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Can we save our questions till the end of the presentation, you know, instead of
It
interrupting?
wasn't a question, I made a comment. I couldn't
No.
see the page number.
No, it was.
I'm sorry, I thought you were talking to me.
No. We can go through those kind of things. If there are minor changes to suggest, this is a draft, so we can correct those things. But, you know, you can point them out or by email or at the end of the presentation. Go ahead, Mr. Lippens.
Sure. Absolutely, I agree. There's opportunity to revise. We're not going to be releasing this on tonight. If there is action, we'd send it to the attorney for review, and during that time, we can take additional comments, and we'll come back with a recommendation at a later time. Is it appropriate for me to say that process? Yeah, I think so.
Go ahead.
So we've got some background information. The next section is on the development site. So we outline some of the site constraints. And then this is also where we summarize in the RFP some of the detail that was included in the North Village plan. And I think it was appropriate to pull some of that information forward into this so that people didn't have to kind of find the kernels of information. But the main thing that we thought was important is the design objectives that were outlined in the plan. So there's a list of required design objectives. We did slightly reclassify some of the required design objectives to strongly recommended because we feel like there is some flexibility. We want to allow respondents to be creative and to look at maybe some alternate site development proposals. And then we have a section, this is on page 6, of encouraged design objectives. And these objectives, we've asked people in their proposal to list for us which of these they're achieving so that we can have a method of evaluating what design objectives they feel like they can achieve in their proposal. The next section, we did include some of the exhibits from the North Village plan. The next section I'd like to highlight is on page 9, which describes the phasing. We did present this as the same phasing plan that was included in the North Village plan, but we recognize that someone might not want to do all of the things that was outlined in the plan, so we added a disclaimer above that says the township will accept proposals that address multiple phases, a select phase, part of a phase, or just specific buildings on the site. For each phase of the proposed development, the developer must indicate which of the following features are addressed. So again, we're asking them to tell us explicitly what parts of this phases they think they can do in the proposal. And when that leaves the door open to the township to maybe even select multiple developers, if someone wants to come in and there's one particular part of the site that they think they can do well, do quickly, the township could consider that as part of a response to the request for proposals. On page 11 outlines the selection process criteria. I think that this is really an important section. This outlines what we need for the development teams to include in their proposal, including their own personal qualifications, qualifications of any partners and other team members. We want a record of similar projects, so we want to see what types of similar work they've done. And then we do want detailed concept plans. So that what this means is they might come back with a concept plan that's different than the synthesis plan that was proposed to the village, and that's okay. But we've asked them to note how it's different, what parts of this vision they think they can achieve, and so that we can evaluate their proposal against the work that the township did to prepare this concept. In addition to the concept plan, we've asked for costing details about the cost of the development. We've asked them to prepare an estimated taxable value of their investment and a statement of how many jobs they think would be created through the development. We've asked them to list any additional financial resources they might anticipate to use, and that might be a combination of public and private funding in that. Maybe they might leverage grant sources. Maybe they might look for land contribution. Since the township owns the property, they might say, you know, if you were to contribute this much of the land, we could provide, for instance, the development of your town green or the beach. So there's a provision in this that allows for some creative public-private partnership, but we don't necessarily lead to any decision. Obviously, the township will look at proposals that most benefit the township financially, and as well as providing the public amenities and features that the township wishes to achieve with the site. We've asked for an estimated schedule so that it can be outlined how long the project will take, when the township can anticipate development to be completed. And then we've asked for more details on the funding commitments. So if they have bank funding, if they need long-term funding, if they need short-term construction loans, and if they're bringing any personal equity or firm equity to leverage some of the resources that are a part of the deal, to make sure that they indeed are solvent in that respect and are proposing a development that can be completed. Other requirements, we've asked for background information on the firm or the respondents. And if there's a part of their proposal that deviates from the plan, we've asked them to spell out, from the synthesis plan that is, we've asked them to spell out and provide a rationale for why they think deviation from that is justified. The next section, which starts on page 13, is evaluation criteria. So this essentially spells out to any respondents the metrics that the township will use to evaluate each proposal. So what we would do is have the next section, selection process. We would recommend that the township appoint an evaluation committee that would evaluate each proposal based on this criteria, and then that committee would meet, discuss the criteria, and come up with a recommendation, and that recommendation would be made to the board for a final decision on whether or not to proceed. I think it's worth saying that the board could receive proposals and decide not to proceed. But of course, that's not the point of doing the RFP. The point of doing the RFP is to find a qualified developer and build a nice park that's consistent with the residents' vision for the type of services they want in the downtown area. The final section is the schedule. As you see at this point, I kind of put to be determined because I thought it would be maybe too soon for me to suggest a time frame. I would say that from the time we launch this to the time we bring evaluations, I think it will probably be 6 to 8 weeks minimum. I think we need to provide, I'll walk through the schedule. So the pre-proposal meeting, I think we should schedule that at least 2 weeks after we launch it so that we make sure there's time for the RFP to get around, and then we hold the meeting. I think the deadline for written questions should be at least 1 week after that. And then the proposals should be submitted, I think, at least 2 weeks after that. And then the evaluation period, I think, could be another 2 weeks. So. I said 6 to 8 weeks, but I think we're probably looking more at 8, at a minimum. If we just did 2 weeks at each stage, that's 8. So we could potentially condense one of those and make that a 1 week. For additional information, we've suggested that the township manager be the point of contact. Obviously, we're here to provide assistance whenever needed. And then I think that the last thing here also is a pretty important detail. We've suggested that people can provide anonymous feedback, and I think that that's helpful. If someone reviews this information, is interested but not comfortable with the timeline or needs more information, or for some reason, for a business perspective, decides that they're not ready to propose at this time. We'd like that information. We'd like people to be able to provide us with that feedback. You know, we put a good amount of time into this process, and I think even learning from people about what they think about our process would be valuable. So that's why we added this at the end, that if someone would like just to provide general feedback, expertise, we'd like to hear that as well. So I thought I'd walk through. I'm here for questions.
Sure. Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Chick.
Could you explain where the RFP is posted and what is the range that it goes out to?
Well, so I think that we should post it on a variety of professional websites. Certainly the Michigan Planning website, Michigan CNU. We could possibly look at some national websites. There are organizations like Ann Arbor Spark. You know, I don't have a list tonight of all the websites, but we would want to get it out through professional organizations. But you know, the main home for this is going to be the Township's website. So we would be directing people back to the Township's website for all of the plans, supplemental information. So we will need a home base. And then really what we're doing is providing a link to this packet and putting it up in as many professional publications as we can.
Okay.
And I think that there's nothing wrong with actually, you know, sending this out to developers that we know might be interested and asking them to share it as well.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions down here? Okay, we have Ms. Zelnick.
So on the first page, so it indicates that we have approximately 23 acres and 10,000 square feet is planned for public space. What percentage is that?
That is actually referring to the town square. It's actually much more when you count the community lawn area. I think we probably should, pull that
I think that, you know,
into the front
that-
too.
Yeah, I think, you know, this concerns me from a public perspective.
So I have actually done an acreage estimate, and when you count it's 23 acres when you count the central lawn and public parking and access. It's I think about 14 or 15 acres dedicated to just the public uses, and much of the fringe use is kind of the buffer between the highway and stuff like that. That is not maybe the prime space. So I think it's about 50% of the site is dedicated to public use, and also the best part of the site because it's the prime area in the middle of the site, and then also the lake frontage. So I think that the goal of this statement was to call out just that town green area, which is 10,000 square feet is appropriate size for a town green, but we've also provided a large passive recreation space, community garden area, and that's much bigger. And of course you can see by looking at the plan the size of space that is actually dedicated on the synthesis plan to that use.
So based on what you just said, you're saying when you say public use, are you meaning open space, park space? Is that what you define public use in your comment? So you said 50% is like public use, okay.
Yeah, I would say open space, park space. I would also count the circulation system, so the trail,
Okay.
Public access drives, public parking areas. I would count that as public space as well, or a public use.
Okay. So, I mean, I think it would be good to indicate such that if I was, you know, and when I read it, that's one thing I commented, if I was a resident, I'd be very concerned that says 10,000 square feet out of 23 acres is going to be public space. And I know we have the plan, but I think it should be spelled out a little clearer that this is it. I would prefer to have more like open space as opposed to including parking space. Like how much is going to be dedicated to greenery, playing frisbee if I want to do it. I know there's the community garden there. I know there's a pavilion there. But what is really, you know, the trail space, I know that exists. But just more of open space without concrete buildings. So that, I mean, that's, I would think that would be useful, especially when you go to the questions in question number 4 that says, didn't residents say they wanted a park only, and it came out that 63% that went into the tax bill out of 480 people responded that. I think this would match up much better with that, certainly to indicate that there's a fair amount of green space, a fair amount of park that will remain in this process. The next question I have is, did our lawyer review this? Do they need to review this?
Yes.
Okay. And so have they
didn't
reviewed
and
it?
they will.
Well, okay, they need to review it.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see here.
Okay. As soon as she's done.
So is it the intent at some point to, what part, there's an indication that we're going to sell the property? On page 2, I think it says purchase price offered for the land. So is that the land that's being used, or is that all of it? I'm not sure on.
It would be the land that's being used.
So if it's 50% that's open for green space or park and recreational, that would not be part that's sold. Is that my understanding?
Unless it were sold as part of like a PUD development, and then a permanent access agreement were put on the property, so it would remain access, which essentially would make the whole site owned by private, but in perpetuity public park or public access.
Okay.
Which would be, perfectly acceptable proposal to consider.
And is there, if I recall that this RFP in this time and process is being funded through our current contract with you, is that correct? That there is
yes.
not, there is
yeah,
not
we're
an
working
additional.
under the planning budget to do this. Correct.
I think that does it for mine right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Otto has a question?
No, I just wanted to have a comment, is that later, Stephen Ains, our township manager, brought to my attention that there is frequently asked questions in here with answers, and the park was brought up in that. So I take it that when this RFP goes out, these questions will also go out.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Mr. Dockett.
I have a statement.
Okay.
We just spent 7.5 years and $400,000 building a sidewalk. And I, as one member of this board, feel like I don't have the expertise. I'm talking about on page 13, about this, almost the last paragraph. Proposed schedule. I am not qualified to do this. I'm not talking about the planning commission. By the way, I'm not a developer. I don't know anything about it. And I see in here where it says that we're going to be involved in this, but I don't think any of us. Well, I won't say that. I don't have the expertise, so I'm not going to be much help on this. And maybe we have some talented people, but on these committees, but I'm not. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bellinger, you had a comment or question?
Yeah, I had a question regarding, pretty much, I guess on page 11, where we're talking about selection process criteria. I was curious, would the submissions by any chance be available to all the board members, as opposed to being completely screened? Would we at least be able to, would all board members be able to at least review these? Maybe we would not necessarily, I guess, ought it be that the proposals go to all the board members? That desired, the board members can certainly have access to all submitted proposals.
Right.
I guess I wanted to confirm that all the board members, that somebody else can decide, oh, absolutely no way, that we should at least be somewhat informed of all the submissions. Thank you.
I see no reason not to. Any other questions down here?
Not at the moment.
Okay. Ms. Manley?
Just my concern also was that 10,000 square feet. That kind of worried me, 'cause that's not even a quarter of an acre. So, you know, if we could get something that does say how much, basically green space, like Lenore said, without parking lots and that. 'Cause I mean, less than a quarter of an acre is kind of a
I think that that's a very good point, and it's not really representative of the whole plan when we start talking, looking at that plan. So I think we just made a decision to summarize just a bit of what's included in this first paragraph, but we should make sure that all the public space is right up front, as given how important it is. So I appreciate that comment.
And then if we do plan to possibly sell the land, I mean, do we know how splits are going to work on that, or has anybody looked into that? How we can split the land off?
Okay.
There's a number of ways that it could be handled. I think practically the PUD might be the most likely opportunity, but it could be split. It could be, we could look at platting. So there's a number of, or even a condo type use.
Right. Right. Okay, I'd like to give the Planning Commission an opportunity if any of them have any questions about this RFP process. Mr. Kuzno.
Just real quick, do we know if there's any interest at this point from any developers in the area? I mean, has this been on this, I know it's not public yet, but it is public, it's public meetings. Have we had any input from anybody from the outside at this point?
You know, there have been developers contacting the township about a variety of projects and interests. But we don't have any, to my knowledge, anyone specifically contacting us about this site yet.
Okay. So then the other question is, if you go through I'm not familiar with the website process for getting RFPs out there. Will we be aware of level of interest? Like, will we know that somebody's actually pursued this thing while we're waiting for this 6 to 8 to 9 to 12 weeks? I mean, is there a way of knowing that Joe developer picked up a packet and he's looking at it?
We could ask for a letter of intent. That's not included in here, but we have asked, we've set a question deadline and we've set a pre-development meeting. So the idea, usually when you do a pre-development meeting, people will, if they can't attend, send you an email saying they can't attend, or often send questions.
Yeah.
So between those two, we hope to at least get a good understanding of everyone that's interested.
Where were those again in the schedule? I didn't catch
Yes,
that.
on page, I think it's 11. No. Oh, no, it's page 13. Yes, page 13 it starts. So it outlines the pre-proposal meeting, deadline for questions, and then proposals submitted. So what we don't know is, you know, if it's posted on someone else's website, how many people will, you know, hit
Quite,
that?
yeah.
But we can pull metrics, I assume, off the township's website to understand how many times people download something.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Other questions down here? Ms. Steffens.
Paul, I have a question about the phasing. So phase one includes sewer and utilities, roads, parking areas with landscaping. Is the intent for all of the infrastructure to go in at one time for everything?
Which page is that?
Page 9. So this is why I mentioned when I was kind of covering this, we added this, the end of the first paragraph where we says the township will accept proposals for multiple phases or part of a phase. because we know people might take a different approach, and we want to tell them that's okay. When we were preparing the North Village plan, it was the preference of the committee to put as much of the public features in the first phase as possible. And so that's why the first phase looks good, from a public perspective, is we're saying, yes, we want all of these amenities, and we want them done at the beginning. I think the approach to phasing here is really an approach that would be a single development that does all of these things, and it's more of a construction phasing approach. So you might be able to get financing for everything that you do in phase one as part of the development, but then build the other stuff as you sell properties or get tenants to do the enter into the retail businesses, et cetera. So I was reluctant to change the phasing in the RFP, since that's the way it was presented in the plan, and it was presented in the plan that way after much discussion about what elements should be included in that first phase. And it's shown on the map there, so kind of all the pink is phase one. And so that's really the retail on Main Street as well as the park and public amenities. And then we looked at kind of two phases of parking and row houses as phase two, and then the loft buildings as phase three, part of the development.
Other questions from the Planning Commission? Mr. Zarzaki.
Yes, looking at your outline on page 13 for the schedule, you had mentioned one week for deadline for written questions. Proposals of this size, which I've dealt with many times, are going to require at least 2 weeks for people to respond. To put a lot into phase one alone, 1 week's not going to be adequate. I can tell you that right now. You're going to get pushback. Most developers are going to be able to respond within the first 2 weeks, most likely. As far as evaluating the proposals submitted, 2 weeks after the deadline for the questions is acceptable, I would think. The evaluation period, I believe, is going to be 3 to 4 weeks for us here. It's going to take some time, depending on how many we get back. That's going to be the big question. And then selecting as well. So that's one item. The items on the proposals that were mentioned, or I should say the phasing, you do have basically all of the park and all of the public access in phase one. Phase two and phase three is what the developer is going to make his money off of. They're going to be pushback on this as well. Mainly because when you start talking about building row houses in phase three, you're going to be encroaching on phase one. You can't fully develop all of phase one, landscape it, everything else completely, and then expect construction to occur right next to it without damaging it. So there's going to have to be some give back and forth in this. I think that's something the board needs to understand. I dealt with construction for over 45 years as a developer, evaluator, and it's not, simple. So those are my current comments right now.
Thank you. Any more from the Planning Commission? So, okay, see anybody else over here? Okay. Yeah, my concern was about the being pretty ambitious with the timetable for submitting the proposals. It seems like a lot of material and a lot of thinking that would need to go on in adapting it to this site, and it seemed to me like a couple weeks wasn't quite enough to put together the kind of quality plan that I would think that they would want to offer. And so I know those discussions can go on. This is a draft, and you're getting really good comments here from the Planning Commission and the board, so we can I'm certain, make some adjustments to this, potentially administratively. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I think I would like to restate the comment about schedule, because I think it's well taken. If there is an understanding with the board and planning commission's suggestion to take a little bit longer, I think that that is a good suggestion.
Are you also, well, two things. What I would recommend is that you make it more 8 to 12 weeks instead of 6 to 8 weeks. That's why I asked initially, because I thought 6 weeks was rather aggressive. The other thought too is, are you going to have a point where they can come back and ask questions? I know we have concept meetings for when we have new people coming in the area for businesses. Are we going to have the same type of thing for the RFP, so they could have a point to have questions asked and answered before they submit their final proposal?
Yes, that is included into the
Okay.
process. And I wrote down 8 to 12 weeks. I think that is in line with the previous comment.
All right, good. Ms. Chick?
Yeah, I wanted to thank Mr. Zarzaki for his comments on the phasing. That helps us understand a little bit better. But this is not in stone. This is all negotiable with whoever decides, okay, so they can kind of mix it up a little bit. And, okay, all right, thank you.
My thoughts is also is that they may want to contribute a certain amount of money toward a match on a grant from a recreation fund or something from the state of Michigan. There might be other opportunities for funding that would help augment the public places. So I don't know what they'll come back with proposal, but there are other options out there for funds that we could take advantage of with matching funds from a project like this. Well, any other questions before I make a motion? We can move on to this number 2. Okay. Ms. Chick?
Quick questions. So with the RFP going out, we did indicate that there was sewer issues, correct? And that we would hope, or would hope that they would contribute to that infrastructure as well? Is there something in there that we would say that they would need to, or are we just going to wait to see if they offer?
In the FAQ that was distributed, the response to the sewer question was that, and it's really township-wide, if the township needs, or if the township wants to pursue new housing, there's a capacity issue. And I'm kind of restating, so the township manager can help me too, but the idea is that that would be paid for by hookups. And this site, if it were one of the sites that new housing were permitted on, there would be hookup fees generated. We didn't specifically in the RFP though call out, could you make a cash contribution to sewer or something of the like. But we have asked for an infrastructure plan, and there's other infrastructure like roads, parking, that's part of this site as well.
Okay. Okay, well, I would like to make a motion for number 2, moving on, to authorize the township manager to work with McKenna and the township attorney to finalize and release the RFP for the North Village. Okay, so I made the motion. Who, Janet? Are you, Ms. Chick supported? Okay. So would we have any more discussion on that at this point? Okay. Well, can we have a roll call vote, please, from the Board of Trustees?
Docket.
No.
Chick.
Yes.
Otto. Yes. Chockley.
Yes.
Zelenak. Yes. Manley. Yes. Bellinger.
Yes.
Thank you very much. That passes. Okay. All right. We can move on to the next item then, is the Downtown Strategic Plan. There are some, if you want a page down on there.
So the other thing we're here to discuss tonight is the Downtown Strategic Action Plan, which includes both a design framework and design guidelines for redevelopment in the area, as well as a synthesis plan for downtown, similar to the one that we looked at on the North Village site, and some ideas for identity and branding, which was one of the main things we heard from residents and business owners when we did our focus group, was that generally a facelift, making downtown more attractive and more exciting was a goal. So we were pretty happy with those identity ideas too. But it is a strategic plan. The hope is that this plan is incorporated into the master plan process the next time the master plan is updated. But from a policy perspective, it's a document, the board can accept it. The DDA has taken action and it adopted it as their guiding vision for the work that they do, and made I think a recommendation to the board. So I wanted to cover quickly the goals and strategies. So it does include a strategic action plan. Beautification, as I just mentioned, was one of the main things that came out of this process. So we've included goal statements as well as some strategic actions that can be taken. And I don't want to, should I read these?
You don't need to, but
Okay.
I mean, there's a great deal of detail in the actual document. But I just wanted to have that up there for
Yeah.
the public to be able to see that.
I think
So
that these goal areas are really important, and they're really a core part of what makes this a strategic action plan. So the first area was beautification. Second area is recreation. So even though it's a downtown, recreation, lake access is still one of the main strengths of Whitmore Lake, and it really was a core of all of our conversations about what development and downtown should be about. The third goal area is business and entertainment. Enhancing downtown as potentially a destination, entertainment point, and again, those types of uses really will work well with the lake as a feature and a destination feature in the region. And it's not just about attracting new businesses, it's about supporting the businesses that are here. And we were happy that so many business owners actually participated in this process and really expressed some enthusiasm about the future development in downtown. The fourth goal was celebration, and I think that this is really enhancing the people element of downtown planning. It was talked about tonight, the success of the Trunk or Treat event, activating the North Village site, and we got many ideas about enhancing existing community events, but also creating some new ones. And that positive self-image was something that residents and participants really felt like this plan should support. And then the last goal that we consider in the plan is connectivity. And that is certainly making sure that walking and biking connections to downtown are improved to the neighborhood areas, but as well as making sure that we're taking advantage of the improvements to the interchange and making sure that people can get to downtown. And when they're in downtown, park and get around, visit all the businesses and enjoy the downtown while they're there. So this is an interesting PowerPoint when my board is almost as big as the screen. Usually that doesn't happen. But I did print a handout exhibit for everyone too, and I passed that around if you want to look at it where you are. But so the downtown plan includes some ideas for infill, so places where potentially new buildings could be placed to enhance the urban fabric. I think that this plan is a strategy that really builds on the existing Whitmore Lake fabric. So this is not a new plan. We don't propose tear downs. We're not proposing a different road or building town in another place. You know, the main intersection is Barker and Main, and that is what this plan is designed to enhance. It's a plan that's designed to really build on what's here. So we have shown some new on-street parking, as well as, I think, probably more importantly, pooled parking for downtown and shared spaces. Some of it does use the North Village site, which in those parking areas are included in the North Village plan as well. We've shown a median on Barker Street with parking to kind of enhance and create that core feature. This is a vision plan, and whereas we're looking at an RFP for the North Village site, we'd like to see that happen, in the next 2 years. Maybe it's a 5-year plan. We always like to be optimistic. This is a 20-year plan, or maybe a 30-year plan. So we'd like to see movement in this direction. Would love to see some of the sites. We spent a lot of time on the marina site, which we think we know there are residents that are interested in that site, and business owners interested in that site too. So there are some things we think can happen quickly. We also spent a good amount of time talking about 75 Barker, which is a site owned by the Township. We also think that really is a near-term site that can really enhance many of the attributes to downtown. But we also wanted to make sure it was a forward-thinking plan. The thing about planning documents is we can set the course again. So we want to set a vision that is bold, but we can reassess in 5 years to see what's happened and what makes sense at that time. We're excited about the plan, and if you've had a chance to look at it, I'm also here tonight to answer questions about that process.
Okay. Do we have any, we'll start with the Planning Commission if they have any questions about the downtown strategic plan. Anybody down there? Anybody down there? Ms. Bellinger.
You just did clear up one question. You said this is more like a future vision, 20 maybe kind of year overall type plan. Because I'm looking through and I'm seeing, I don't know where some of the money is to be coming from for some of the pictures and things I've seen. So maybe that, since it's not like an overnight affair, maybe that would answer that question, just that it's a gradual development. But, I'm very concerned about, we don't have money to be, and tax money is something that needs to be more respected than it tends to be. So my concerns are, of course, regarding costs and who eventually pays for the costs. If it's a gradual plan, that may work out, but that's... if we vote something today, what are we voting on this? What would be wanted to be voted on?
Well, the intent is just to accept the downtown strategic plan as a development strategy for the Whitmore Lake downtown.
So what kind of commitments does that entail, though? I mean, it sounds just kind of vague as to this.
Yep.
Is this a contract of form with the Downtown Planning Group or a contract with McKenna? What does it mean?
I think it presents the vision of this body for what can happen down there and what we would like to see down there. One thing I would like to mention, though, is sometime in the past, and Janet, Ms. Chick was on the Planning Commission also with me, we changed the zoning in the downtown to allow just this kind of thing to happen. So those buildings can be built up to the sidewalks just like that. So there's really no change to our zoning. Potentially there's a tweak here or there, but the zoning currently allows this kind of development to happen down there. And so if we had someone come in with some vision who wanted to build some new buildings, they could do it.
So actually there's nothing that needs to be done to move forward with things in this manner.
And
is that a correct statement?
To move forward, no, I don't see any reason, Mr. Lippens.
The plan is really consistent with the zoning and with your master plan, but it provides additional detail that those documents don't. So to accept it as a completed project, certainly adopted by the DDA for policy, and to use it as a guiding document, that's appropriate. We would recommend and do recommend that when the township does adopt their master plan, this is incorporated and considered as part of that process. And the state does have a regulated process for master plans, which we also talked about the master plan project when I presented last too. So, and the good news is, if this is completed, it can be basically incorporated as a chapter. So it's done. We can continue to do outreach on it as we talk about other parts of the township-wide development.
I guess I'm kind of concerned, is there a financial commitment with trying to approve something of this nature? And there's really is no hurry for it, so this is something we could actually digest if we wanted to for a few weeks.
Ms. Chick, did you have a comment?
Basically, what we would be doing was just the board showing support for the vision of the downtown area as it's presented. It's not in concrete, it's not written in stone, it's just saying, we like this idea, it matches the zoning, and it's just showing support. There's no commitment to anything.
Yeah, Ms. Otto?
I basically was going to say the same thing, that it's really just a concept that is put together. The one concern, though, I have is on the last page, and I'm just throwing it out there because I seen it with when I was on the Blue Sky Committee and we did a marketing analysis of the township. One of the issues is that we have an identity crisis. We don't know if we're Northfield Township or we are Whitmore Lake. A lot of people don't know the difference. And so I think that when we do create this downtown, we better be consistent of who we are. And if we want to stay Northfield Township, keep it Northfield Township. If we want to be inconsistent, then go with the Whitmore Lake. But Whitmore Lake is the lake, and Northfield Township is where we live at.
That's a great comment. There was some discussion about that, and that the downtown would be called Whitmore Lake. Certainly, this plan doesn't lock you in or end that discussion.
Right.
It does offer an idea for branding and creating an identity in downtown if you want to move forward with Whitmore Lake. But, you could always change that for sure.
Yeah, I personally feel that not all of us live in Whitmore Lake, we live in Northfield Township, and that Northfield Township should be part of the...
We have Horseshoe Lake too.
Right, right.
It should be Northfield Township. Are we going to just exclude Horseshoe? I don't think so.
Anyone else down here? Did you have something, Ms. Manley?
No, I guess just to go along with everyone else, I'm not a big fan of the Whitmore Lake sign, so that was one of my concerns, but that's something we can further discuss.
Let him go. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Dockett.
I would like an answer to Dawn's question. Are we committing any money? Yes or no?
No, and adopting this would also help say that the project is complete, which would be a great resolution to the work that we did on it.
And just so everybody understands, I don't think we should be called Whitmore Lake because it doesn't make sense to me. We have other places. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Zelnok?
You had mentioned in there that the DDA has adopted this, is that correct?
Yeah, as a policy document for their
Okay.
work.
And has the Planning Commission adopted as a policy?
They haven't seen it yet.
Yes.
Yeah.
So my recommendation is that, we get a letter. I'll take your word, and I'll take the word that the DDA, but I would like to see something from the Planning Commission first that they recommend and have adopted it as a policy.
So that is one of the reasons why we have a joint meeting
Okay, so we're
tonight.
gonna do it together.
They're looking at it tonight too. I know we're...
So I guess I would prefer they vote first.
Sure.
And then the township vote based on that. Personally, I looked, probably, I think so. I personally look at them, they have huge responsibility. And they, to me, they look at this day to day or week to week, and I look for their recommendation, and I consider that in my decision. I think they do great work, and I appreciate all their efforts they put forward. And the next thing is, I agree. I think some of the division in the township is because we have Whitmore Lake, Northfield Township. I think we have an opportunity to say we are Northfield Township.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is huge. We have Whitmore Lake, we have Horseshoe Lake, we have lots of lakes. So, anyway, I think, that's my comments. Thank
Okay.
you.
I know some of the planning commissioners had a question. Mr. Kuzno?
So, a lot of this parking or this median on Barker, does that require acquisition of right-of-way from private property to make that work?
Or trading. For the median, yes.
The median and the parking that you got there.
So
In
what
fact,
we're
the various parking all around on Main Street and on Barker looks like would be outside of the existing right-of-way, is that correct?
I believe just the parking on Barker would be outside of the existing right-of-way. But it's in the parking area that's there. So really what we're doing is we're formalizing the parking on those two lots into more of the public way. And the idea is that we're also creating public parking behind those buildings. But
Okay.
absolutely, we're showing some negotiated land use decisions that would have to be made in concert with property owners. And for a long-range vision, that we're comfortable with what's shown
Yeah.
there.
And all of the roads are county roads, correct? The township
Yes.
owns nothing.
Yes, so the county's a player as well.
Okay. And I guess, why are we calling this a 30-year document? Why wouldn't we push for this sooner rather than later? I mean, not like right away, I'm saying, but why are we looking at 30 years from now? It just seems, way out there.
I think if it could happen much sooner, that would be great. But I say those statements because I want people to understand that we want to present a vision. And it's not necessarily a vision that you have to be comfortable with today, and it doesn't all happen at once. Some things are dependent on the success of other elements.
Yeah, I suspect North Village would help a lot. That would
Exactly.
kind of be a
Yes.
catalyst to get everything else rolling, so that's a good point. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Steffens?
I have a question for the people that have lived here longer than I have. My family, we've only been here about 3.5 years. Does this plan address why downtown is where it is now? The loss of businesses. Does the plan get to that so that we're not repeating mistakes that have been made in the past, if there have been, or if there have just been circumstances beyond anyone's control? Is this getting to the root of why the downtown is struggling?
Can you answer?
Yeah, I would say that I think this is probably the first time. There's been other plans and other planning work done, but this is really a new step. It's a public-facing document. It's in concert with the plan for North Village, which for the first time, the fact that the township owns that site is huge, taking this step, I think, is a part of addressing why maybe other efforts in the past haven't really coalesced to the type of impact that some people wanted. I think also it takes time. And from what I heard in speaking with business owners is that, many property owners, many business owners would be excited for development and were generally very favorable of this process. But they also wanted to develop in a way that was, appropriate and in line with what residents want. And the message that I heard was that they wanted the residents to kind of lead in the type of place that was developed. So I think that having this type of a plan and having a vision that is accepted by the Planning Commission, by the board, by the DDA, I think, helps to take a step that maybe hasn't been done in the past.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Ryan.
In response to the question from the Board of Trustees that the Planning Commission look at it, we just literally received the same plan for review as of Friday. Although it's my perspective in looking at the plan, it looks like a good one. But if the Board of Trustees is more comfortable I would suggest, and I would like to pose this question to the rest of the planning commission, that we review this for our next planning commission meeting, which is early next month, just to give us a bit more time to come up with any possible comprehensive questions that other commissioners may have. I'd like to hear from the commission if they would like to do that, and if it would make the Board of Trustees more comfortable with coming to a decision right tonight. So is that okay, Madam Chair?
Go ahead and take your...
Commissioners, can I get some input? Mr. Iaquino?
I think that's a wise choice because, again, we're taking in a lot of comments here, and there is a lot of visual there, and that's been part of the problem, that there hasn't been any strategic planning for Northfield Township for many, many, many years. And so it'd be wise not to try and rush it now, but to have some time to review it, and I think it'd be a great item on our next agenda. I'd be in favor of that.
Thank you. Mr. Kuzno?
I agree.
Mr. Zarzaki?
Yes, I think we can, excuse me, review it and by the next meeting make our decision on it. It is a good plan. Developers look to develop in areas where you have strategic planning so they know what they're getting involved with. If you don't have a strategic plan, then the developer is kind of wandering around what he's going to do. Will my plan or submittals be acceptable? Were they not? Here we're giving them pretty much what we want. It'll be included in our master plans, and we can easily take care of this at our next meeting.
Thank you. Ms. Infante?
I think it's really important that we take into consideration some of the trends and changes that are going on in this area around the lake, that the housing's changing, people are building second homes, and I think that we want to take into consideration the way the character has changed a bit more and before deciding whether or not this is the vision that really fits in.
Thank you. Ms. Steffens? Anything?
I would appreciate more time to review it.
Thank you. So if that gives the Board of Trustees some type of direction you could probably take tonight, but specifically as to, and you know, I know that Mr. Lippens is here specifically to look and see if there's any outstanding issues with this. Personally, myself, I don't see any after reviewing it. That may change, but as the plan can also change. You know, this is an idea to solidify what the downtown planning group had worked on, correct, Mr. Lippens?
And
So-
the DDA with representative from the Planning Commission.
Correct. So there's been a lot of talk, and I appreciate all those folks' efforts in getting to this step of this plan, and I think it's a good one, but I think if it makes you comfortable, we can continue from there. Thank you.
Well, it doesn't have to get rushed to adopt tonight. I don't see any impediment to this going through the Planning Commission and having them take a look at it more carefully so that they can give whatever comments. And the one thing I see about this plan is it really gives a vision, it gives an idea of what could happen on a site. And when I look at, you know, for instance, Barker Road and the potential for a new building in the front of that lot, that can be done right now. Polly's could build on an entire new section of their store if they wanted, but have they ever thought of that? You know, so some of these ideas here might just be the trigger that gets something going downtown. And, you know, so whether this is adopted or not, it's still valid and it's still able to happen. One thing I noticed in here is the market study that we didn't even talk about tonight. And there is a market study. I think the mix of businesses that we've had in the downtown haven't been quite correct over the years, and that's why we may have seen some of the decline that we've seen. But this may give some ideas to the business community out there about what might work down there, and we could have some businesses, some niches, some interesting, new, novel businesses show up downtown, that would then, trigger the revitalization of downtown. So I'm really excited about this plan. I'm okay with waiting. I wouldn't want to wait too long. But anyway, Ms. Chick, go ahead.
I'm excited about it as well, but I did want, if I could, my perspective to respond to Ms. Steffen's question about kind of what happened. My understanding is that up until like 1950, this was a resort town. There was people all over the place. There was shops, there were hardware stores, there was bank, there were grocery stores, there's all kinds of car repair stores. It was a busy, busy town. Then they put 23 through, and it pulled everybody off of the Main Street. So what has happened is, of course, our business is declining because we have nothing attracting people into the township. This hopefully will do that because it'll be new and exciting, and we can offer things to people that we don't have now.
Ms. Otto.
I think what's very nice about the North Village area is that it's bringing the concept of you're combining the downtown with it, but you're also including open space. So you're giving other property owners within that area. I think a lot of them are just probably doing a wait and see. Let's see what's going to happen. A lot of people do own buildings down there, but they haven't done anything with them. So that's what I'm thinking is a lot of people are just wondering, what are we going to be doing down there? I think once they see the concept, once they see a direction, people may want to buy into this.
Okay. Well, we can move on to the next item then. I guess we won't be making any... Okay. Well, we could make a motion that we hear from the Planning Commission before we adopt this strategic plan. So let's, I move that we have the Planning Commission consider the Downtown Strategic Action Plan and Design Framework at their next meeting and bring their recommendation back to us.
I'll support.
Okay, so that's a motion by Chalkley and support by Otto. All in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed?
Roll call vote, please.
Okay.
Zelenak? Yes. Bellinger?
Yes.
Otto?
Yes.
Manley, yes. Chick? Yes. Docket?
No.
Trockley?
Yes. Thank you, that passes. Okay. The next item is our zoning administrator coming on. Oh, and this is Vidya Krishnan.
Good
Welcome.
evening, everyone. For the members of the Planning Commission and the trustees whom I've not had the pleasure of meeting before, my name is Vidya Krishnan and I serve as your zoning administrator at the Township. I'm here before you tonight to present a brief overview of what exactly the zoning administrator does for you and why it is done, what the powers are set forth in the zoning ordinance, and why it is very important for the Township. Before you in your packet is a summary of 3 reports for the last 3 quarters of the zoning administrator's activity, but I prepared an even briefer summary of it to give you a snapshot of how it works. Since January of this year, I have approved a total of 85 zoning compliance applications. I have denied a total of 6 applications, so that is an approval rate of almost 94% of all applications are approved. The zoning administrator, in my role, I work with Mary every single day to try and resolve issues. We work with every homeowner, every property owner to try to get a resolution or a solution for any of the problems that they might have. As a result, our approval rates are up there. I have denied a total of 6 zoning compliance applications, 2 of which were for single-family residential homes, 1 of which was for a garage that was placed in a side yard setback when there was multiple acreage for the garage to be placed. The other was for the construction of an accessory structure on a property with no home. Both were violations of your zoning ordinance. I have no choice but to turn them down. The 4 denials that were issued for commercial properties were uses proposed by property owners that are simply not allowed in the zoning district in which they were proposed. As a zoning administrator, my role is strictly limited under the ordinance as to what I can and cannot do. I do not have the authority to override the zoning ordinance. That is a power that rests with the Planning Commission and the Board of Trustees. So those applications were denied. One of the other roles that I have just started performing is issuing final site plan compliance. The Planning Commission works very hard to approve site plans for projects. Unfortunately, the township has got no system where once the plan is approved by the Planning Commission, nobody goes out there and checks if what has been approved has actually been done. The township has a running list of projects that have never been inspected after Planning Commission action. I had the opportunity to go out and inspect 2 of them and close out 2 cases, one of which was from 5 years ago. So we just...
Oh, no. No.
I can't catch up to you. I don't know what page you're on.
I am just...
There's nothing in my packet that says zoning administrator activity.
Mr. Dockett, she's just speaking right now. She didn't
Yes.
put, it's not written.
It says, okay, well, I'm looking for what's on the screen.
No, I'm
No.
just speaking freeform.
Well, if you're talking about any of this, please tell us what page.
Absolutely, absolutely. I've just put it as few bullet points, but I'm sort of expanding upon them to give the trustees and the commissioners an idea of what exactly has been done. I work on a daily basis with Mary. I get multiple calls from Mary or emails from Mary asking for clarifications on zoning ordinance interpretation, which is what I do. I am by qualification and professional, a planner, and I have worked as a city, township, and village planner for the past 19 years. I also worked with the code enforcement officer for a short duration when Mr. Rankin was over here. He had code enforcement questions, and I had the opportunity of working with him to try and figure out where the violations rested on a couple of properties. I am available for questions from the township's building official, Mr. Violent, whenever he needs clarification on how a particular section of the ordinance is interpreted. I also respond to calls from applicants and homeowners. For the most part, I do try to direct it through Mary because she is the point person of the township. It is only fair that Mary gets all the questions, and if she believes it's something beyond what she can interpret in the ordinance, she directs it to me and I give the information back to her. That would be the right way to do since Mary is the township's zoning point person. And one of the other roles I perform is to provide a quarterly report for all the board members so you know exactly what work has been done. The roles of a zoning administrator are clearly set forth in your zoning ordinance. I'll go to the next slide, and this is an excerpt from the zoning ordinance section 36971. It sets forth totally 6 roles of the zoning administrator. The first one is for the zoning administrator to enforce all the provisions of the zoning. This is not a function I currently perform. I perform it only when I'm specifically requested by the township on a project to go out and check for enforcement action. Otherwise, this job is left to your code enforcement officer, and this is something that has not been previously done in the township, which might account for some of the violations you see around town. The second is to issue zoning compliance certificates, and this is the bulk portion of the work that I do. All applications do come to me. I review zoning compliance applications, sign permits, soil permit approvals, on which I work with the township's engineer. Any such permits do come through the zoning administrator and are approved. The third function is for the zoning administrator to make inspections of sites. This is not a function I currently perform. I perform it only when I'm specifically requested, as I was asked to do on specific projects at town. And on those occasions when I'm asked by the township to come out, I do come here and I go out with the code enforcement officer as the township authority so I can actually be on the properties to check on what has been or has not been done. The zoning administrator is required to identify process violations. Once again, I have not been authorized by the township to perform this function, so right now this role is not being performed as is listed in the ordinance. The zoning administrator is required to keep meticulous records, and I think Mary does a fantastic job of it. She's got a very good tracking system, and every zoning compliance application or sign permit that goes back to her, she maintains meticulous records, so I think the township is in safe hands. And finally, the zoning administrator is required to provide a report to the Township Board of Trustees and the Planning Commission, which is in your packet for the first 3 quarters. The next thing is one of the other roles that is required by the zoning administrator is certificate of occupancy. Whenever the planning commission approves a project or the building official approves a project, before the building can be occupied, it is the role and the duty under the zoning ordinance for the zoning administrator to inspect and ensure compliance with planning, zoning, to make sure that the engineer has signed off on the project, and to also make sure that it meets all the codes and the building codes. And the zoning administrator is required to sign something called as a certificate of occupancy. The certificate of occupancy is an official certificate that a property owner has to show that they're legally entrusted to occupy the property. This function is currently not being performed by the zoning administrator. I do hope it's being performed by some other official at the township. I'm assuming it would be the building official currently who's signing it, but this is not a role that is currently being performed as is outlined in the ordinance. One of the biggest questions or concerns that the trustees possibly receive is questions on zoning compliance applications. Why do we need a zoning compliance application? Why do we have to do this? What is required in an application? The zoning ordinance, that is an excerpt from your zoning ordinance that says what is required when somebody turns in a zoning compliance application. For the most part, the applications received are from homeowners, and they just know basic drawings. I do not hold as true to this as the ordinance requires. I try to work with the applicant. At times, I teach them how to just hold the scale, just measure off. I actually, between Mary and me, we help guide them in how to just put together a basic drawing. When the homeowner is not able to provide that for us, I rely on Washtenaw County GIS. I look at their additional documents, and I try to put together a document so that I have enough information to legally approve the information that is provided. So at all points of time, the zoning compliance application process is designed on service to the community. I do my best. However, at times I do get applications that at one time I did receive one drawn on a dinner napkin. Unfortunately, I cannot accept that as a legal document, as the township attorney can attest to it. These zoning compliance applications and documents are an official record. They safeguard the township from liability, so they do have to be in a format that is legally acceptable. I receive drawings of all shapes, sizes, and forms. As long as I think the drawing is acceptable and meets the bare minimum requirements, I do accept it as an official documentation. If I have to make any corrections on them, I do so with red ink, and I attest to it so that it is accepted as a document. Now, the main reason why we insist on accurate drawings, sometimes we have had homeowners go back and redraw because, after all, it is their property, it's their ownership. I, as a zoning administrator, cannot do their drawing, so I try to guide them into what they need to revise and resubmit to me so that it's in an acceptable format. The reason, why do we need accurate drawings? First of all, it is an ordinance requirement. It is in your zoning ordinance. The second thing is, it avoids future property line disputes. We all hope we have good neighbors, but occasionally that does not work. If the drawing is incorrect and your fence is 2 feet onto your neighbor's property, that is going to cause a problem. It prevents the creation of a non-conforming structure. For instance, if somebody proposes an addition to their structure, the required setback is 30 feet. What they have submitted on their drawing is 28 feet. On the face of it, 2 feet might not seem like much, but God forbid they build the structure, tomorrow there is a fire and the structure burns to the ground. The first thing the insurance company is going to do is to pull up the drawings and see what did you build. And you can bet they will find out that the structure that was constructed was a non-conforming structure. And they will have a rider clause in their insurance that will probably not pay you for a non-conforming structure that was constructed. The only recourse for the homeowner will be to come back to the township and say, well, you're the one who approved a non-conforming structure. If I drew it wrong, you should have been the one to tell me that it was wrong and should have corrected it. So it safeguards the township from liability. You don't want to be responsible for a private property loss. As I'm sure the township attorney will clarify, you need to safeguard and protect yourself from liability. Finally, following the rules is very important to protect your own health, safety, and welfare. The setback requirements are in the ordinance. They're there for a reason. They are there in the event of an emergency for fire or emergency personnel to get to. For if there is a fire, it does not spread from one building to the other. That's why you have side yard setbacks. You have front yard setbacks, so there's enough room for parking of your vehicles for your guests, so you're not encroaching onto the sidewalks or the public rights of way. So the requirements in the ordinance are there for a reason, and the driving purpose for a zoning ordinance, protection of public health, safety, and welfare. That's what these applications are trying to get along. And finally, it is proper planning. It's just the right thing to do. Moving on, zoning violations and penalties. Something that was interesting was recently at the township's request, I went and visited a couple of sites for zoning violations. And the violations were just so enormous. One of it was so brazen that it was something that I've really not encountered before in my planning career, which has spanned over 20 different Michigan municipalities. One of it is a very big business that does not even have a zoning compliance certificate approval, which even a homeowner gets for a deck. So at this point, I did issue a detailed letter of violations, and I believe it has been shared with the trustees. The next step would be for the township to decide how they would like to bring these properties into compliance. We would like to be able to work with the property owner. Maybe we can bring them back to the table and say there is a process to be followed. Even if it hasn't been followed so far, maybe we can go backwards and just try to do it the right way, at least to the extent that is feasible. The zoning ordinance under section 36-979 has got specific notification of what penalties are applicable if you don't follow the ordinance. This is not a function that I currently perform, even though it is the responsibility of the zoning administrator. I'm hoping when the township has a code enforcement officer, the code enforcement officer would be more on top of it and be able to bring these violations to attention. To address one of the questions Ms. Steffens had, some of the things have just been building up over time, and we are playing catch up on a lot of stuff. It's not like individual properties are being picked on, it's just that stuff has happened that unfortunately is now, when the change or an alteration to the property is coming into the township's focus, we are finding that 3 steps were missed. We are at step 4 and the first 3 steps were not completed. So we are just trying to make sure, and wherever possible and feasible, help the property owner to complete those first 3 steps so we have everything fair and square. And finally, the reason I do get asked sometimes, why do we even need all these regulations? This is an excerpt from the Michigan Association of Planning and Zoning. Why do we need to have the zoning ordinance enforced? And I'm reading it right off the publication. Zoning ordinance enforcement is vital to the success of a community's planning efforts. When you have such a beautiful North Village plan, you have a beautiful downtown strategic plan that you're thinking, you have the beautiful Whitmore Lake, the Horseshoe Lake, the other lakes. It is a beautiful community. You have large acreage lots. Without zoning, the beauty of all that you have in the township, it is difficult to protect it. Once you stop enforcing your ordinance, it's only a matter of time before you will have to stop enforcing it for every single property owner. The prime thing about planning and zoning is you have to apply the rules fairly to everybody. Every property owner deserves the same consideration, the same courtesy, and applicability of the same rules. And that's what I try to do. My role as the zoning administrator is to serve the community, and I do it to the best of my ability. Wherever we can solve the problems, we shall solve the problems. Where we can help, we shall. And at times, there is no other option but to say no, the use is just not a fit in the community. There have been times when I've come across ordinance requirements that I do feel are just a little bit too much. Sometimes I feel they are not suitable for the area that the township is zoned for. In those instances, I do bring it to the attention of the township. I bring it to the attention of the planner so that he can bring it before the planning commission, which is the body that will decide whether they want to take on amending the text of an ordinance and then bring it before the Board of Trustees, who will finally decide if they want to adopt such an amendment. So I'm here before you tonight. If you have any concerns regarding how planning or zoning is administered as a zoning administrator, I would be happy to answer them for you and clarify anything. In my other role, I do handle the Zoning Board of Appeals cases. So I have met some of the planning commissioners who also serve on the Zoning Board of Appeals. So that's another one of my roles. I'd be happy to answer any questions or concerns.
Ms. Bellinger, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for coming here tonight. I very much enjoyed the educational presentation is what it really is. And thank you for clarifying what is going on and what you do and clearing up a lot of questions for us. Yeah, thank you very much. Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Otto.
I just want to commend Vadia. I've been on the ZBA for 6 years, And the last 2 years, we worked very closely with Vadia. I have to say that the reporting that we received from her, and I had to put it down in words because it's very hard to understand, but she provides such clear and concise summaries for us that when we go to have to make a decision, we're not there looking through the books, having to interpret ourselves what is going on. She provides a very clear and concise interpretation. And as a member of the ZBA, our vote is the final vote.
Yes.
And we want to make sure that we are not only doing right by either a homeowner or a business owner that's coming in, but we want to make sure that we're doing right by the township as well. We've had a lot of situations where they were questionable. And I have to say that a number of times we had a gentleman that already put the building up, and we had to work backwards with him. And Vadia was very good at working with him to get the necessary documentation in place, because bottom line is if anything happened to his building, it wouldn't, or his house in this manner, it wouldn't have been covered. So he learned some lessons along the way, as well, as much as painful as it was. But we've had situations where we've had to turn people down, and it was the right thing to do, and it was the right thing to do for the township. When we have people come to us putting in garages, putting in driveways and everything, the whole board is very critical of the information that we get, because we have to understand every piece that's presented to us, and Vadia does that in an excellent manner. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Chick?
Yeah, I also want to thank you. The one thing we have been hearing as board members and from the residents is that they want code enforcement. There are people that don't like it, they don't like the rules, they don't want to comply, and those are the people that complain. But the majority of the township wants code enforcement. It's been an issue for a long time, and we really appreciate the effort that you've been putting in, and our zoning officer, Mr. Rankin, when he was here, for doing that for us. And I think that more of the residents need to see that we're very serious about this, and that the board supports that effort, because I've been hearing that complaint too, that the board does not support the efforts in the township, and that comes from people outside of our township too. And I don't know how to get over that reputation other than making sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, so thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else down here? Ms. Manley?
Just real quick, again, I just want to thank you for your work. I mean, I know it's a hard job. And some of the stuff that you did point out, like the C of Os and nobody checking the site plans, I think that's definitely something maybe we need to work with Stephen on, because that's kind of scary.
Yes.
And also, I mean, we've had 18 new homes and 17 new structures. That's pretty impressive. I wasn't aware of those numbers. And
I think it is a reflection of the last 1 year. But I have had a couple of homeowners come to me. They see the township is changing, you're enforcing the code, rules are being followed, they want to come and live here.
Right.
Contrary to belief that planning and zoning actually drives away development, it actually brings development, because people like predictability. They like coming into a community knowing, if I'm going to invest $100,000 over here, I know the township is going to make sure that everybody around me is going to keep the stuff. If I'm going to put in $100,000 into a property and the next door neighbor is not going to be asked to do anything, why should I waste my money? They like predictability. They like the fact that a township has got certain standards. You will hold your standards. So the standard of everybody around you also comes up. So we are getting a lot of new applications for people putting in new homes and putting in additions. In fact, Mr. McGee, who was over here, he went through a couple of applications, and we literally became friends because I had to make him revise so many times.
Right. Right.
He was nice enough to tell me that he enjoyed the experience.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Zelnok?
Yes, thank you. I know zoning ordinance is not one of the most popular functions. Treasurer is not popular either sometimes, especially during tax season. So it's a hard job, but it's something that has to be done. How do you think our zoning ordinance compare to other municipalities that you may have worked in the past? Do we need improvements? where do you think, I mean, that might be something as a planning commission as a whole, as well as the zoning, where, how do we rate? Are there improvements? I noticed you had indicated in your presentation that when you do find something, you do bring it to the planning commission.
Yes.
But overall, in your assessment of our zoning policy?
We have a good zoning ordinance, but there are some sections of it that definitely need to be revisited and revisited fast. One of it is Whitmore Lake Waterfront District. As I was going through the application, some of the properties are coming up for sale in your waterfront district, and some of the uses that are permitted by right are taxi terminals and bus terminals on your waterfront. I'm sure that is not something that is going to rejuvenate the downtown or get people to come in with boutique stores in here. If I'm going to have a hub next to me with 30 taxis parked, I would think twice before I invested the money to put in a beautiful storefront. So some sections of the ordinance definitely are written with, do need to be revisited. Other sections are very well written. I think overall you do have a very good ordinance. The challenge is it has not been enforced. And the results that you see mostly down on Whitmore Lake Road are the result of lack of enforcement. So if we start giving people the impression that we are here to work with you, this planning and zoning is not an obstacle to development. It is your partner in development. We are here to work with you, but you have to follow the steps. If a homeowner who builds a deck or builds on an addition can follow the rules and do it the right way, I'm sure a business owner can do the same. They're all the same. They're all property owners. So we can work with them always to try and see what would be. Sometimes there are existing nonconformities. Stuff has existed for a really long time, which is fine. They can remain. Maybe we can just make it slightly better for the benefit of the whole community. So we have sections of the ordinance that do need to be revisited, and I think every time I come across something like this, I mention it to Mary, and Mary will ask me a couple of times, this doesn't even make any sense. Does it make sense to you? I'm like, not really. So that time we would bring it to Paul's attention. So he has a running list of zoning text amendments that need to go before the Planning Commission. And the Planning Commission, based on their experience as residents of the community, will say, you know what, this is there for a good reason, and maybe this doesn't make any sense and needs to be changed. So I'm definitely hopeful that we'll be working on some amendments to fix the gaps or the missteps in our ordinance soon.
Have they been identified? I mean, do you have a
Yes.
have a list that can be shared?
Yes,
That-
there is a big list of sections of the ordinance that need to be corrected and revisited. I believe that can be
Did I
shared with
miss
all the
that?
members.
No, I'm sharing.
Okay.
That list.
Yeah, I would like to
Yeah, I would-
potentially see that list.
Right,
Or
I would just-
like to see that.
I would like to mention that Mr. Lippens passed out a list, and the Planning Commission actually talked about this list at their last meeting, and they're not prepared, we're not prepared
that's
to get
fine.
into all the
Okay.
details, but here's the list, and I thought this question might come up, so I asked for this particular document, which I had not seen before, although I had been giving some input also. So here,
In
So
answer
this
to
is
the
for
second
your
part of your question, Ms.
reading at
Zelena,
home.
I do work as the planner for other townships, and our ordinance is not as strict as some that I have come across. I think we are we have a reasonable zoning ordinance. I do work as the planner for some communities that have extremely strict zoning ordinances. Ours is more reasonable, and it gives enough flexibility to the Planning Commission to work with applicants to get to a solution.
Okay.
Just, one item has been like, certainly I know, as you say, we have to enforce our ordinances, make sure we that this is what we're doing, but one has been like going from one commercial to another commercial, and, is there a possibility to streamline that process?
Yes, I think
When it's an existing building, an existing use, and it's going, changing use, but it's a permitted use.
Understood. Yes, that is one of the concerns that I have faced, where there is an existing vacant commercial building. You're changing from one commercial use to the other commercial use that is permitted. So why do we even need the approval process? There is a reason for that. It can be an administrative approval. Now, one of the questions that arose on a recent case was, it's going from one commercial use to another commercial use. The challenge over here is commercial use spans a whole wide variety, as the Planning Commission can attest to it. While we might get a retail shop that sells clothes or that sells maybe candles, it's a very desirable use. We would love to see it in a downtown. If we are saying a change of use from that to maybe a store that sells groceries, it's, you know, it's fine. It retail sales to retail sales. But if you're going to say it's changing from one commercial use to another commercial use, then tomorrow the store that sells candles can change to a massage parlor, can change to a gas station, and they all will not be required to follow the same rules because they're all commercial uses. The same thing will apply to an industrial use. You can have a mom and pop welding shop, you can have an industrial use, you can have a steel milling. They're all industrial uses. You will have to treat them all the same, which is the reason why change of use technically means when the intensity of the use increases, it's a change of use. It is not one commercial to another commercial. It is when the intensity of one commercial use changes to a higher intensity use. And even then, we do have a process in our ordinance which does need to be revisited. Currently, the ordinance does not have any halfway measures. It asks for the full site plan approval process. I've tried my level best to say, okay, we will handle it administratively, which means it doesn't have to go before the Planning Commission. It can be handled administratively. But the way the text of the ordinance is written is even for administrative approval, there are certain minimum requirements, which definitely can be revisited and scaled down. Maybe we can expect the applicant to turn in something that is simple, that provides the information that is required, and that can be passed. Unfortunately, presently, the way the ordinance is written, it doesn't allow for such a narrowed scope of submission, so I have to require what the ordinance requires. But change of use is always a challenging thing. We can make the process easier without totally throwing it out. So that's definitely something we can work on.
Thank you.
Mr. Dockett?
That's one of the things that I would be concerned about. I'm a businessman. I don't know of anybody else on this board that is. I know Sam is, but I have been in the building that I'm in since 1970. So, and you know, I'm about ready to get out, retire. You know, and I'm worried about who can come in. You know, and that's very unfair, in my opinion, to someone like me that, you know, that's my 401k that you're screwing around with, you know. That's the way I look at it. So I'm in retail. I don't see why somebody couldn't retail where I'm at. That's what I do. So I think it's unfair for the person who owns the property. I've been there, like I said, for over 46 years, paying my taxes. So I believe I should have some rights. So.
If I may answer that in brief, I think there is a misconception that a property owner with an existing use that has existed as long as yours has does not have rights. You absolutely do. Your use probably predates the zoning ordinance in some cases. There is an entire section of the ordinance which is very important, which is the non-conformity provisions. If it's an existing legal non-conforming use, and by legal I mean at the time you established it, it was allowed. So what if the zoning changed subsequently and the use is not allowed? As long as the use continues as it is, it cannot be discontinued. Zoning will not take that right away from you. What we are attempting through planning and zoning is, maybe 30 years ago, there were no landscaping requirements or something. What we are hoping is if the business is taken over by a new entity, they will clean up the site. By no means is planning and zoning saying that an existing use that predates possibly the zoning ordinance needs to go away. What the expectation is, you will try to make the site look better to keep up with the community as a whole, not to take the use away. I have recently approved a couple of zoning compliance applications for uses that they're technically not permitted. One of the uses could not be approved because it was established in the first place without any approvals recently, not long ago. So it wasn't grandfathered in technically. So there is definitely, I think there is a misconception out there that, you know, I have had this all this while and suddenly you're going to come in and tell me that I cannot do it. That's not the case. You are protected.
I'm not worried about me. I'm worried about, no, you can't do that when it's time for me. I've been there, like I said. I was predated by everyone, and as far as I'm concerned, they changed my zoning once. I went to court, and I was okayed for highway commercial. So I don't care what it says on the map. I know what it was when I started there, so.
I would definitely recommend if the board members are approached by any property owner who's a business owner who has concerns about their use if it's non-conformity, that they do talk to the township, and possibly Mary will direct them to me or Paul, and we can explain to them so they don't get worried about stuff that really they do have certain rights. So they don't get worried and assume certain rights are being taken away from them when they aren't.
Well, I'm worried about when the person comes to the township and talks to somebody. Oh, no, you can't do that. Well, when I'm ready to sell, I'm coming to the township with the person if I can help it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dockett. Okay, anyone else at this time? Okay. I know that we had discussed as a board in the past having Vidya Krishnan on, at the office, like for office hours, and it was put in the, there's enough money in the budget for that. I just wondered what the rest of the board thinks about that, and I guess potentially make a motion to authorize the township manager to work with McKenna to establish some office hours for the zoning administrator, if that's possible.
Definitely. McKenna does serve township clients, so
right.
If you want us here, we are more than happy to help. Right now, it's constantly Mary's trying to get me on the phone, and we are emailing back and forth.
Right, and I know that Mary Bird would appreciate having Vidya on site, and then our residents could make appointments and come in and see you.
Yeah, but I think the board needs to have what that cost is first before we can even make the motion to do that.
Okay. Okay. Well, then I would like to make a motion to have the township manager explore that, the cost of that with McKenna, to have it happen for, whatever his recommendation would be, a half a day or a day, a week. That would be extremely helpful.
I would support that.
Okay. So motion by Chalkley, support by Chick. Any more discussion on that? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Chalkley?
Yes.
Manley, yes. Zelenak? Yes. Bellinger?
Yes.
Otto? Yes. Chick?
Yes.
Dockett?
No.
Okay, thank you. That passes 6-1. Okay.
Can you please repeat that motion?
A motion to authorize the township manager to explore the costs associated with having McKenna establish office hours for a half a day or a day a week, and bring that back to us. Okay. That was something I paid attention to when we put the budget together, and we didn't take that out. So I believe there's a decent amount in there that could handle that, and I'll look forward to that.
I'd like to make it friendly. Why didn't you say so much hour? Why a day or a half a day? Why? At least either 4 hours or 8 hours.
Well, Miss,
I can understand that.
we'll get that information back from it.
Not with what you just not with what you just voted on. You won't,
Okay.
unless you change it.
I can tell you what Ms. Krishnan bills us for, so I'll be happy to do that later.
I think the motion is to just have the manager determine what it would be, what it would cost. Yeah, at this point, is a research.
Sure.
That's why I voted no. I don't know how much it would cost. I don't know if it's a half a day or.
Well, we just asked for him to tell us, and to see what it would cost. Okay. Moving on to the next item.
Thank you all.
Thank you. That was a wonderful presentation. It's so educational. Oh, can we have this?
I just have a quick
Go.
request, Madam Supervisor. That PowerPoint, can you give us copies?
Yep. She actually has copies. All right.
Could you send it electronically as well?
Yes. Yeah, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding out there, and this really helped clear it up. Okay, moving on to the next item, and we can release our presenters tonight to go home and enjoy the rest of their evening if they'd like. Well, item 6 is not necessarily, yes, item 6. What would you like to mention?
It
The
would just be an
situation with item
update.
6?
Yeah, so I
Yes.
think that for item 6 on the agenda tonight, if you're ready, I don't want to rush. Ready?
Okay.
Vidya discussed something, but I understand at the board retreat there was some discussion about the zoning administration and planning process. The township manager shared some of the discussion with me and directed me to bring a memo to Planning Commission. At the last Planning Commission meeting, we did discuss some zoning changes in addition to kind of the housekeeping items that Vidya tracks. We also discussed the change of use requirements in some detail, the administrative review process, establishing standards for waivers of certain requirements, and we discussed the non-conforming, revising non-conforming versus conforming regulations as well. And Planning Commission took a vote to direct me to work with the township manager to develop that memo into also a scope and a budget that would come before the board. So procedurally, the board can expect to have this on a future agenda with Planning Commission's direction as to how to proceed with any modifications to the zoning ordinance.
Okay. So we don't need to discuss this item at this point unless people had specific items that they wanted to bring up in relation to zoning issues that have come up recently. Okay, seeing no one. Okay, well, thank you both very, very much. It was a really educational, wonderful evening of presentations. Okay, the next item on the agenda is, it says interim code enforcement officer, and I'll let Mr. Ains handle this item.
We're switching to use the microphone, not for me to take office, so. I had mentioned at the last meeting with the resignation of the code enforcement officer that we needed to have a replacement, and mentioned to the board there were two alternatives. One would be to hire an individual. The other would be to utilize a firm such as McKenna, and there's a couple others or several others that do the same kind of work. The board authorized me to pursue both of those, and I anticipated that would take 2 to 3 months. In the meantime, every day we're getting more and more calls, more complaints. There are also a number of issues that the staff cannot handle because they involve legal issues where our attorneys indicate you have to have somebody that's specifically qualified in the zoning and planning. And so even though I have that background as well, I haven't been doing that specific jobs. Therefore, I would not qualify for being a professional witness for that purpose. However, in the meantime, I had an applicant submit a resume unsolicited, and in looking at the applicant, I felt like they were qualified for the position, and I did interview them, and initially suggested perhaps that we hire someone on an interim basis for that period of time until we would go through the whole process. But in reviewing the applicant's qualifications and the interview, I was very impressed by her. She's willing to do either way, either interim, or my other suggestion would be to appoint her permanently to the part-time position. What that would do is actually save you money in the interim because you would not have to advertise and you would not have to go out through the RFP procedure. In addition, if you go to the RFP procedure, I would expect the cost would be higher because you're using a professional firm. That on the positive side, you would have backup people in case the person was absent or left or whatever. But on the other side, they have a lot of overhead that they'd be charging you for. So I'm asking the board for permission to make an appointment to the position on a permanent basis. And as with all of us, we serve at will. So even though it's technically a permanent basis, the person would be demonstrating to the board and myself and various commissions their qualifications as they proceed with taking the employment. So I can do this in a couple different ways. Either you can direct me not to do that and go ahead and proceed with the previous direction, or you can authorize me to appoint her temporarily as an interim, or you can authorize me to make the appointment, or I can present to you the resume of the individual and ask the board to consider making the appointment. And being that I'm new and haven't made any appointments here, I'm not really sure which procedure you would like to follow.
Okay. We have, okay, some discussion at this point. We could make a motion and then discuss it. Or we can, Mr. Dockett has a question. Do you want to make a motion, Mr. Dockett?
No, but I'd like to make a statement. I think that I would be voting for the person to be hired that we're talking about, and not McKenna, because they would cost us a lot more money. So the person that he's talking about, that I'd like to know if it's for 1 day a week or hours, or I'd like to know that.
Mr. Ains, he wants to know if it's 1 day a week, or we had 20 hours, I think.
Yes.
What do you have down here?
What you had budgeted was 20 hours a week at $25 per hour. What I have discussed with the individual is starting at probably 12 to 15 hours, and then as we go along, see what the need is. But I think she would demonstrate to the board very quickly the value of her services. And given the volume of complaints we receive, I think the 20 hours is actually the goal, that we would want to have someone that much.
20 hours is what?
I think that should be the goal, because I think the volume of complaints are so high that you're going to need somebody to spend that amount of time to investigate.
Okay, I thought you said 12 hours or 14 hours.
Yeah, I'm talking about starting her at 12 to 14 hours, 15 hours. But
Go up to as much as 20.
yes.
That sounds fair to me. Thank you.
Would you like to make a motion, Mr. Dockett, to
I guess I would make
have, okay.
I don't think I can. I'll let you make it.
All right. Okay, I'll make a motion that we hire the, can we get
It's,
the new code enforcement officer
yeah, I know, I just got him.
for up to,
Yeah, I've checked on references, and I've had the attorneys review the applicant's resume.
okay, I'd like to make a motion that we hire the code enforcement officer Janelle Pratt.
You didn't have it because I had questioned whether the manager had the authority to make the appointment, or whether the board had the authority, and if I had the authority, I would go ahead and make the appointment.
The person on my right has it. I didn't have it.
No, I just...
Did you have it? Oh, well,
No, nobody's had it except for myself, and I, I blacked out the address.
there was one that came from this side, so somebody had it besides you.
No, I think what happened, I'm sorry, but I don't want to disagree with you, but, I copied these this afternoon. I kept them in my possession until just now, and I distributed them when the board asked for the name of the individual.
How did I get this one then?
That was yours.
It came from that end of the table.
I don't know how they proceeded down here, but I think it went past you inadvertently, and they were passing it back.
Anyway, so we have a motion by,
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to direct the manager to hire Janelle Pratt or code enforcement for up to 20 hours a week at $25 per hour.
pending a background, positive background check?
Yes, yes, pending a background check.
Okay. Okay, so we have motion by Bellinger, support by Docket. Roll call vote.
Check. Yes. Otto. Yes. Bellinger.
Yes.
Yes.
Manley, yes. Zelenak. Yes. Chockley.
Yes. Thank you. 7
Thank you.
yeses by 7. All right, great. And that is the last item. Okay, second call to the public. Would anyone like to come up and speak tonight? At the end? At the end. Yes, thank you.
Barbara Griffith, 438 Jennings. This is regards to the identity crisis that we have. We have it and we'll always have it. Talk to MDOT, we are Whitmore Lake. Come north on 23, it says next 3 exits Whitmore Lake. Come south on 23, instead of saying 8 Mile, it says Whitmore Lake. The post office is Whitmore Lake. If you Google an address here, it's Whitmore Lake. That's our mailing address. We have it. MDOT is making us a brand new sign for the 8 Mile entrance.
It says Northfield Township.
And it's going to say Northfield Township. We have an identity crisis, but we can't change
Yes, I know that.
the name of Whitmore Lake. And the other point I was going to point out is keep in mind that if there is some commercial development in the North Village area, there will be TIF money captured, and the DDA will put that money back into the downtown area, so that synthesis plan for downtown may very well happen a lot more quickly than 20 or 30 years from now.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else like to speak at this time? No? Okay. Okay. Welcome.
Dale Brewer, 11548 East Shore Drive, Whitmore Lake. Green Oak Township, keep it in mind, you've got 2 townships, you got 2 counties. It's not Northfield, you've got an area that encompasses. It's unfortunate, you've got the 2 townships, you got the 2 counties, you've got the 1 lake, you've got 1 mailing address, 1 school district. Do with things that I have to do when I say it. I live in Whitmore Lake, Green Oak Township. You can add to your identity, but I don't know if you can fully change it. But the things I wanted to point out, there was a discussion when you were talking about the North Village project regarding the sewer costs. And I don't think that they've been explored sufficiently that unfortunately McKenna has all of the information on it. You have 2 problems with the sewer. You have 1, a sewer capacity problem. You also have a line problem. Right now, if you were to build this in that area, you would have to either replace the sewer line or add an additional sewer line. That's not a cost that should be borne by the sewer district to incorporate and to handle this. This is something that is a developer cost, should be borne by the developer. Anything that has to do with expansion within the sewer district for a water treatment or a wet well treatment plant, that may be something, again, that can be shared and come out of the other costs, but in no way should the sewer users be responsible for expanding a sewer line that's at capacity because it hasn't been done. This is going to have to be dealt with not only from the aspect of this, but all of the future development that you have within the sewer district. You don't have, you have capacity at the plant. You do not have capacity to get any more shit, excuse the term, to the plant until you expand the lines. So, and it goes right along with, everything that's going on there. I don't know if your engineer has explained this properly. Anything to do with your tap fees does not have anything to do with expanding the lines of the sewer. You've expanded your district beyond that. The people within the district cannot absorb those costs. It has to go to the expansion areas. Secondly, as Mr., I'm going to probably ruin your name here, John Zarinsky mentioned, your concept of developing all of phase 1 before you do phase 2 or 3 is a backwards way of doing development. You can't develop your roads, you can't develop all of your underground, you can't develop all your utilities, then bring all of your heavy equipment in over the top of it, because somebody's going to have to go back and replace all of that work. So you need to revise your schedule, relook at it, figure out what items maybe can be incorporated into phase one, but you're not going to be able to get all of this into phase one and have it a completed project before you get into phase two or phase three. You've got one heck of a bill there. You've got between $9 and $10 million is projected, and somebody's going to have to ensure that for phase two and phase three, and your developer's not going to do it. So you need to revise that a little bit.
30
and then
seconds, Mr.
you're going to have to excuse me because you got some points here. The other thing is you're talking about your concept plan in the downtown plan area. You're talking about, you've got residential parking. You're talking about putting public parking in front of your residential parking with no place for residential units. You're going to have to go back and revisit that as you look at your future plan there. Your 8 Mile entrance is your primary entrance into Northfield Township. You've already identified it off of US 23. Barker is a limited access road. It has one entrance and one exit. Doesn't service the whole community from all directions, so you might want to again revisit some of that. And your center of your roadway is also not necessarily the center of the roads that are there. All of your roads have been put off a center in many cases, so even though you've got a 66-foot easement where you're showing the center of the road, you could have 45 foot, you could have 50 foot on one side, and the other side is all public land. So you need to go back and get some of these surveys before you start to get too in-depth into your road plan for that area.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else like to speak at this time? Okay. Seeing no one, we can move now to board member comments. We have any comments? Well, let's let the Planning Commission start. Does anyone have a comment they would like to share with the board at this time? They're all ready to go home. Yeah, okay, great. Then we'll start down here. Ms. Otto, anybody down that way have anything?
Yeah, I do. I do want to say that as I was coming in tonight, I had to take the 8 Mile Road exit, go over the bridge, and the lights are on the bridge.
Nice.
So, and it looks beautiful. So I just wanted to emphasize that. The one thing when I talk about that we have an identity crisis, it's not so much the identity crisis is that it's a branding crisis, is because we really haven't branded ourselves very well. Yeah, we are Whitmore Lake. Yes, we are Northfield Township, but we're also South Lyon. We're also Ann Arbor. I mean, we have a lot of addresses, a lot of school districts in the Northfield Township area, but we haven't branded ourselves very well. And I think the exercise that we're going through now with these master plans and everything, that will bring about the branding of who we actually are. So I know when we did the exercise of doing the SWOT analysis, the Blue Skies Committee, that's what really came out is we didn't brand ourselves very well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Janet, do you have anything? No? Okay.
Jackie said what I was going to say.
Oh, okay, great. Ms. Bellinger.
I want to thank the presenters. It was a good presentation. I very much enjoyed Vijay's presentation regarding code and so on and so forth, and that was very informative. And yeah, support local businesses. I'm looking forward to the future, and that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dockett?
The township will be getting the light bill for 8 Mile Road.
That's true.
The township will be cutting the grass up there. I voted against paying the electric bill, and I voted against cutting the grass there. I would like to say Happy Halloween, buy and use local services. Don't forget to vote on November 6th. It is for $245 million. Thank you.
Ms. Manley?
Yeah, just really quick again, thanks McKenna for the presentation. It was great video. Had great explanations of what she does too. And then thanks, Stephen, for finding the code enforcement person. I mean, we've just been 2 weeks without someone. That's pretty good for us. So, thank you. And vote November 7th.
Right. Okay. Ms. Zelnok, do you have anything?
Yes, reminder to vote. It's always good to vote. And just a clarification, our meeting was always scheduled for November 14th. That is not a change.
No, that's correct. Okay. I do want to mention, as far as branding goes, having gone to the Redevelopment Ready Communities program, I know Gaylord got a grant to have a professional company come in and produce coordinated branding, one for their DDA, one for their downtown, and one for the community, and it's pretty interesting. So go to their website and check it out. But they received Gaylord, yeah, or it's either Gaylord or Grayling. I think it's Gaylord. There's canoes and things. Grayling? Okay, check it out anyway, though. And so who knows? There could be some funding available out there if we get ourselves certified as a redevelopment-ready community. Mr. Ains has raised his hand.
Just one thing to note, as you go out, the green pump that's on the picnic table is the one that's for the community gardens and was bought with the grant that we had. So I just wanted you to see it. We won't install it till spring when the weather's better.
Will you say something about the meetings? Will you say something about...
No, I was talking about as you go out.
I understand that, but will you mention that we're going to have a problem next month with the meetings, the township meetings?
I didn't say anything about that.
I know you didn't, but I talked to you about it, and you said that you would maybe bring it up at the meeting.
Okay. When I talked to Mr. Dockett, he indicated he had a concern about the timing of the second meeting in November, the one that is right after Thanksgiving.
The 28th.
And he wanted it to be moved to right before Thanksgiving. And so I did ask a couple of members, I'm sorry, I apologize, I didn't bring it up as an agenda item, but if I had asked what the procedure has been in the past as far as holidays, and I was told that Thanksgiving hadn't been one that had been adjusted. But if the board would prefer to meet the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, then I would need direction on that. Okay. The one reason I mentioned it was because the way the Tuesdays fell in October, there were 5 Tuesdays. The result is between this meeting and the next regularly scheduled meeting is 3 weeks. And then if we were to move the meeting up, that'd be the 4th week. So if a meeting was going to be changed, it would help to know as far in advance as possible. If you're not going to change it, that's up to you.
And it screws up my trip to Florida.
Okay. I'm not, Ms. Chick, what?
But we canceled all of our business items for today, so are we going to be backing up with things if we cancel a meeting in November?
Right.
Yeah.
No, we have a second meeting in November. There's something scheduled for that. Oh, the priorities, the goals and priorities. I heard about that. We have a huge list of things that are in process.
I wouldn't be in favor of changing.
Yeah, I think we're good. Okay.
I noticed that the one is poorly timed, being the 14th, right before opening day.
Wow. Okay.
It's the first time in 10 years that we had a meeting after Thanksgiving, that I've been on the board for 10 years.
Okay. Anyway, I have no more comments. Does anyone? Anyway, okay. Motion to adjourn. Okay. Motion by Zelnok and support by Chalkley. All in favor, say aye. 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 Okay. Anyone opposed? Thank you.
979-5113. Yep, you're welcome.